Welcome everyone to the KC conversation. The previous episode was about my personal experience dealing with suicide. This episode is a little more objective. We look at how to approach dealing with suicide. So I've divided this into four stages: what makes you suicidal, what you should not do, what you should do, and how to recover from this feeling. So let's go to the first stage, which is what makes you suicidal. So the first factor over here is isolation. This refers to people who generally are quite isolated. They don't have too many friends, they don't talk to too many people at the office, and they don't have much of a social life. This is because people who do tend to meet their friends regularly would have a lot less of a chance to feel isolated. It might just occur that some of your friends might notice and ask you about it. Another factor is being acutely depressed. Depression may creep in due to different factors. So let's talk about a couple of them, like financial pressure or emotional problems. So you may have financial pressures because of commitments you have with banks and whatever you've committed to financially. And you may not be able to fulfill these commitments for various reasons. You may have lost your job or you have other commitments that require priority. And this may cause a lot of anxiety, which may lead to depression and self loathing and various other unhealthy thoughts. And there are also instances where one may think that he or she is a burden to the people in their lives, and the the people around them don't care as much as this person would want them to. And one way this person deals with it is by ending their life so as to punish those people. This is an extremely unhealthy way to look at it, and it's irrational, and it's one of the symptoms of being depressed and feeling suicidal. Another factor is not having a way out, where you seem like there are no options available. This happens when things don't go in your favor when it comes to things at home with your spouse or at the office. Let's take, for instance, you have a problem with your manager and you have responsibilities, obviously, and your manager does not like you, and there's some bad blood and negative energy, and your relationship with your manager is has deteriorated to the point where you're scared about your appraisal and your performance and such, and you can't perform your job well, you can't get better at your job, and you definitely can't win any points with the manager. So this could seem like a situation where there's no easy way out, but you need to remember that there's always a way out, and eventually it will show. And you also need to remember that a job is just a job. The job has no control over your life, in the sense that it's just a means to an end. And if you treat it that way, you can disconnect yourself emotionally from this job. And eventually you will figure the situation out. And the last factor to consider in this stage is all of these factors coming in and forming a vicious circle of darkness. What I mean by this is all these factors, when they come together, they cause you to think irrationally, and you end up making bad decisions which are not logical. Now, the next stage is why you should not suicide. Over here, I'm referring to some points made by Jordan Peterson, where the first factor over here is that life is divine and you are of significance. And if you think about this, you are on a planet of about 7 or 8 billion people. And even though you may think that it's a large number, we are on a planet which is in a solar system, which is in a galaxy amongst millions of other galaxies in a universe. And we haven't seen any other life as far as we can tell. So that means that there are things that are bigger than you which you don't understand. And by ending your life, you're just causing an end to that significance. Also, you need to understand that there could have been a million possibilities of what happened when your parents conceived you. Out of the millions of babies that could have been born, it was you. You have been formed in a very unique manner, and you should respect that fact. Another factor is that people who are related to you, your family members and your friends, and anyone who actually cares about you, in many instances, these people don't recover, and even if they do, it takes a lot of time to get their life back on track. Sometimes they get so devastated that because of the guilt that's involved, and they feel that they might not have done everything that they would have needed to help you. So their lives essentially get disrupted. And the last point over here is you owe it to yourself and the people who are close to you to try and to give yourself another chance. Because if you think about it, from the time you're born, the amount of energy, the resources that have been invested in your nourishment and you being nurtured to be a human being and grow up and be educated and work, there's a lot of there's a lot of time involved. There's a lot of sacrifice by people who cared about you. And you owe it to them, to those people, and you owe it to yourself because you obviously put a lot of work into becoming who you are. And so many things had to come together to make sure that you survived and you thrived until now. And even though it may seem that your life does not make too much of sense right now, and it doesn't matter because you're not doing something very significant globally, you shouldn't think about these things in that manner. You should just understand that you are who you are for a reason, and you being alive is important, not for you, not just for you, but also for all the people in your life. So the third stage is what you should do about it. So I'll talk to you about what you could do if in case you feel suicidal. The first thing you should do is you should talk to your family and friends. The reason behind this is you should not go through something like this by yourself. So you need to inform people in your family and you need to inform your friends that this is something you're going through. But just keep in mind that the people who you are informing, they don't have too many problems of their own at that moment. Because helping you deal with this is quite draining on people. So if they don't have their act together and they are going through something very extraordinarily strenuous or something that's taking a lot out of them, it would be better to keep them out of this situation because they wouldn't be any good to you and it may cause them a lot more problems. The next thing that you can do is you can call a helpline. Most countries now they have helplines to help people deal with suicide. And if you're not aware of it, you should just uh, Google it or something. Because as far as I understand, most countries have a helpline, and these people who operate the helpline, they are trained well, and they'll offer you some assistance. If not, they're definitely not the best people to talk to, but your first stage of dealing with this is through them, and they have ways to help you feel better. Then you can also check if your insurance company provides you with a phone number, or someone you can speak to, or someone you can meet with regards to this issue. And a lot of times you may be surprised to know that they do have something like this. So check with them as well. And another thing that I personally feel that you should do is you should get out of this environment. So if you're stuck in an office and you're depressed about being over here because everything's working against you, then take a few days off, like a unpaid leave or something. If you're in the house and if you're in a certain environment, you need to get away from that environment. Go outside the city, go camping, spend some time in someone else's house. And if you're in another country away from your own country, then you could try going back to your country for a few days. Maybe being back in that environment may reset the way you feel, because we are different when we are in our own comfort zone. So you could try that out. And if you can afford it and if the facilities are available to you, then you definitely should visit a psychologist. So now let's talk about the final stage, which is recovery. And this stage is essentially after about a couple of months after you've been going through the whole suicidal event and you've decided not to do it, and what and you followed all the steps about how to get out of it. So now when it comes to recovery, you need to ask these people whom you've entrusted with about your situation. You need to ask them to keep a check on you and make sure that you are positive and you keep thinking right, because this is quite important. And I'm quite sure they'd be more than glad to do it, even though it may be awkward for them. But this is important, and most people understand that this is important, so they would go out of their way to make you feel better. The next factor is to assume that things will get better. There are situations where it's hard to feel like that. It's hard to think that the situation will get better, but you need to believe that the situation will get better, and it eventually will get better, because every if you think that you want something to happen, and your thoughts and the environment will work towards making this possible. And the final factor for recovery is to take up a challenge. If you are of a strong mindset, then you could try learning a new language, and working on something that requires you to like focus on it quite intensely. And if you still feel like you have a problem dealing with things mentally, because coming out of this kind of a situation is quite mentally devastating, and it takes time to recover. And if you are in that kind of a situation, you can try working out intensely. You can do cardio or push-ups or running or swimming, something that takes a lot out of you, because the endorphins act as a antidepressant, a natural antidepressant, and this helps you feel a lot better mentally, and it allows you to cope. This personally worked for me, and I've heard it works for a lot of people. So definitely try that out. So we've covered the four stages of dealing with suicide. One thing to keep in mind is when you do visit a psychologist, I've heard stories where um, good standing people have taken antidepressants and they have gotten uh, physically dependent on it. So I would suggest trying to deal with the matter without taking medication, and try to change your environment and your lifestyle so that you feel better naturally. That would be the only thing I would ask you to keep in mind about with regards to meeting a psychologist. So I'll conclude this video over here. Thank you for watching and stay positive.